Today we speak with Cara Carbone, a high school teacher from Bellingham, Washington. Cara's here to share a pebble in her shoe around engaging her high-achieving students with rich tasks. She implements some low-floor, high-ceiling tasks, but struggles to do this consistently due to time constraints and the large number of preps she has during the school year.
Stick around and you're going to hear how we help Cara reshape the resources pulled from online sources and teachers pay teachers into meaningful, engaging experiences for her students. This is another Math Mentoring Moment episode where we chat with a teacher just like you who's working through some problems of practice, and together we brainstorm ways to overcome them.
Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr. We are from MakeMathMoments.com.
This is the only podcast that coaches you through a 6-step plan to grow your mathematics program, whether at the classroom level or at the district level.
And we do that by helping you cultivate and foster your mathematics program like a strong, healthy, and balanced tree.
The trunk of your tree represents leadership in your organization or the classroom pillars in your math classroom. The roots of the tree represent mathematics content knowledge and what it means to be mathematically proficient.
Like a tree requires soil, water, and sunlight, your mathematics program requires a productive educator mindset and the belief that all students can achieve at high levels. Your professional learning structure or your professional learning plan is represented by the limbs of the tree.
The branches of your tree represent the development of educator pedagogical content knowledge, including effective teaching and equity-based teaching practices. And the final section of the tree are the leaves, which represent the resources, the tools, and the classroom environment.
If you master the 6 parts of an effective mathematics program, the impact your math program will grow and reach far and wide.
Every week, you'll get the insight you need to stop feeling overwhelmed, gain back the confidence, and get back to enjoying the planning and facilitating of your mathematics program for the students or the educators that you serve.
All right, let's jump into the conversation with Cara.
Hello there.
There we are.
How are you?
Good.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Glad that we have an opportunity to chat here. It looks like you took some time and completed the organization organization math program assessment. And and are looking for a little bit of some guidance on some next steps here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you're at a school. You're a bit of a lone ranger, it sounds like, and it sounds like there might be, sort of this potential for a math coaching position. Take us down that rabbit hole and let's learn a little bit about you.
Okay. Well, I've been teaching for quite a long time. I live in Bellingham, Washington, and I've made pretty much a lap around the city. I taught at one public school for 11 years, and then I taught at a different public school for 11 years, and now I'm teaching at the tribal school, and I've been there for 11 years. And, I really love the school. The thing that I'm missing, though, is that collegial support because, as you read, I'm kind of a lone ranger. After the pandemic, our kids aren't super, how do I want to say it? They're very smart. They're smart. They just don't love education. And they're very reluctant learners, I guess I'll put it that way. And so I'm just kind of struggling to come up with something to hook them back into learning especially after COVID, because they're super disengaged.
Yeah, that's definitely, like, I feel like a lot of the gains I think we were making before COVID feels like we not only went back, one step, we went back a few steps and maybe haven't kind of gained back what we had beforehand. Like, that's how I kind of felt with my classroom. And I know that, the teachers that I was supporting as well, kind of, I noticed that with that group as well. It's like, hey, we were making a lot of gains, but, we're not back yet to where we were, I think, before. I don't know if you're feeling similar to that.
Yeah. And, I want them to enjoy being there. I'm not super hard driving on, oh, we've got to, cover all this ground because we've missed so much. At the same time, we're releasing them out into the world and they're not math fluent. They, and they don't see the value in what and they're not having fun. I mean,
Right.
I've listened to your podcast a little bit, and you guys are the fun guys making math fun. And I feel like I used to be the fun person and I've lost a bit of that. So I'm just trying to, find something that can help fill the gaps in the students' learning, but also just get them excited about math and see the relevance of
Got it.
what they're learning.
Yeah. Cara, we always have to ask this question. Every guest gets asked the question about their math moment. So when I say math class, what pops into your mind as sticking with you through all these years?
Well, I had a student, and this is just recent. It was an amazing question that he asked of me that I shared with some of my former colleagues. He said, Ms. Carbone, if math was a person, who would it be?
Ooh. Now, I'm wondering, did you have a response or were you just like taken by the question?
Well, I was taken by the question and I did not respond immediately because I wanted all of the other students in the classroom to think. I said, that's a super interesting question. I bet it would be a different person for every single individual in this room.
I love it.
And so then I threw it back at the class and I said, I want you to tell me who would embody math for you, right, and why. So
which ones did any stand out? Like maybe some maybe positive ones, maybe some that maybe either surprised you or maybe even like saddened you a little bit. I'm sure.
Well, it's like a two-headed beast,
Yeah. I love it. I've done the verb question, with some students saying, if math is a verb, what is math, right? And like some are like it's hard, it's hard work, it's determination, it's a climb, things like that. Others are like it's drowning, and things like that, right? So but I mean, talk about what a great conversation for those students to be able to at least like reflect on it, because I think a lot of times too we just sort of go through school and it's just a thing we do, right? It's like, well, it's the school year and we get up and we go to school and we learn these things and we come home and we don't really think about like our relationship with a subject area. So I think that's a really interesting question. And I have a funny feeling if the student who asked that question, how would you describe maybe their relationship with math? Like, is it a positive one? Is it like, are they kind of the joker of the class? Or are they just like, just the sort of the creative one that sits there and thinks about interesting things during class?
Well, he's definitely an out of the box kind of thinker, very creative. And, at times he doesn't think he's a very good math student, but then he'll latch onto something and then just announce, I'm so smart. I'm good. I can, I mean, it's delightful to have this young man in my classroom.
Oh, awesome. That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for sharing.
So what would you say you've done so far to kind of like gain back that, engagement level, that, that fun you're looking for in your class to get students who, maybe smart, but maybe achieving at high levels, but need to like enjoy math and see math in a different way? Like, what would you say you've done so far to kind of, achieve that goal you're looking for?
Well, I try to give them interesting problems to think about. And, Dan Meyer, right? The 3-act, I mean, he was the one that, am I saying his name right?
Yep.
Yeah. What I learned from him was, to pose an interesting question, and don't give the kids all the information that they need, require them to ask for the information that they need. And, so we were doing geometric probability and I have a big Promethean board and I had created kind of a fun geometric shape, and I gave them little rubber chicken darts that they could shoot at the Promethean board and try to land in different zones. And, so I posed the question, if it was completely random, if, rather than aiming at the dartboard, if you were to hit the dartboard at random and your rubber chicken lands on the Promethean board, what's the probability that it would land in each of the given regions? And it was a pretty deep problem. They had to find the area of an octagon inscribed in a circle, and also a square inscribed in the octagon. And so they got into that. So those types of things where it's a pretty rich problem. It wrapped in a lot of stuff that we'd learn on trigonometry and areas and fractions and percentages and things like that. So I'm trying to do those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
how would you say that the students responded to that activity? So you'd kind of highlighted a few things, and John and I talk about this, withholding information to try to keep that curiosity going. I also like that you didn't necessarily pick a task that was super animated or had all kinds of shining lights and all of these things. You picked an idea, an interesting problem, and you sort of held back on the problem even at first, sort of just made it about this sort of random shape, but then presented that question involving the probability piece. So how would you say that students responded? And then also, like, kind of on top of that is, what do you think, maybe is holding you back, or maybe holding other educators back from making more math, scenarios like or similar to that one?
Well, first, they responded favorably. Of course, they were super into these rubber chicken darts that I gave them, so
Right.
it got them excited about the problem. For some of them, they got lost with the rubber chickens. Were so excited about that they
Right.
didn't step up and do the math right away. I mean, the second part of your, so they were excited to do the problem. They were excited to play with the little darts, and then once they settled down, they dove into the problem, and I was pretty satisfied with their engagement with that problem. I think, well, as I mentioned in what I had written to you, I'm the only general ed high school math teacher. And I know our middle school teacher, she's super structured. I think my classroom tends to be a little bit wild. And so I think, a more conventional teacher would shy away from some of those things, just because it does create a little bit of chaos.
And I think, like, I'm imagining that teacher walking in going like, what is going on in here? And when they're used to saying, like, having this very controlled environment, versus, say, a classroom that is thriving in a way that I like to use the word thriving, like that gives off a very visual of like what my classroom should look like. And that's something that, we're always striving for in our classes. Like, how can I make this class thriving instead of kind of just the sitting in getting? And it sounds like, that lesson, it had your students thriving. I'm curious about two questions, I guess, about that is, one, did you feel like it opened the gateway for you to kind of get at the math at either a quicker pace or a deeper pace with your students? And then also, what is saying preventing you from, say, doing more of that, or is there a deeper problem that you're looking to kind of get guidance on here? Because it sounds like you're starting with an engaging problem, and we're trying to get that class thriving. But it's like, well, what's happening next? And like, is there what's preventing you from like keeping going with that process to like create that thriving a year?
Well, I mean, I spend a lot of time, coming up with my own problems.
Okay.
And I think my biggest hindrance is time. I have like 5 different preps. And so I need to be, I guess, a little bit more, I don't know what the word is. Maybe I need to, take something like that problem and morph it into things that can be used in a variety of my different classes to minimize the amount of time that I'm spending prepping for these little activities.
I'm wondering,
So
when
time is a
Right.
huge.
yeah, and I'm guessing there's a ton of people who are feeling the exact same way, right? Like they're going, hey, if I had all the time in the world to like sit and think and craft and all of those things, every math class would be much more engaging, right? So I'm wondering, what would you be relying on, let's say, in a scenario where, let's say, it's tight, you're tight for time. You're like, oh my gosh, tomorrow I'm teaching, I've got 5 different preps and I just don't have enough time to sort of like fully craft the experience like you just described. Like, what would be sort of the go-to resource in that perspective? And then I'm wondering, maybe there's a place where we can help you with a next step as to like, how do we maybe get a little bit of both without necessarily like feeling like you're way over here throwing out, those other resources. So what would that look like? You've got no time and you're going to go into class tomorrow to teach this specific group. What does that look like and sound like? What sort of resources do you have access to? And what would the lesson sort of look or sound like?
Well, I don't know. Gosh, when I get desperate, I go on to, well, I love Desmos. I always find some cool stuff there. And I think when I get kind of desperate, I go to Teachers Pay Teachers for just a fun little engaging activity. Gosh, I'm just getting up in the morning here too, so I should have set my alarm earlier to get my
No
brain
sweat,
engaged.
no
No
sweat.
worries. No
I know
worries.
you're probably 11 o'clock where you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are.
Now here's a question for you, because I think there's this general sort of sense or feeling that educators have out there that like teachers pay teachers is bad. And, I'm going to go ahead and say it right here that, what, there's a ton of great resources on there. There's a ton of maybe not so great resources out there too. But ultimately, at the end of the day, where I guess why I wanted to know a little more about that, if you had, let's say, a textbook to rely on, it sounds like maybe you don't have a curriculum resource that's provided by the school or the district. So you're kind of left to your own devices to kind of go out and find something, right? And I could go and, let's say it's Teachers Pay Teachers, I could go and find a resource and it might be a really great resource. But the part that I'm wondering about, and I'm going to throw this at you and have you maybe think about this a little bit, is like, what if I went and I found a Teachers Pay Teachers resource for that day? And it's, maybe there's an activity involved in there. And I'm wondering, like, is it possible that you might be able to put some of those same thoughts into what you did in the previous activity to maybe transform that Teachers Pay Teachers activity? And for other people, that I'd be talking to, it would be whether it's a textbook, whether it's it doesn't matter what the resource is. Is there a way that maybe it's like, hey, I've got that as a starting point, and then I just focus to the first 10 minutes of that lesson? Like, what could I do to craft that one prompt? When you described your scenario, now I know throwing darts and things is, fun, but I would argue that the more important piece of the activity that you described to us was that withholding of information and asking a good question. And I wonder about that, if it's possible that I might be able to like kind of hit 2 birds with 1 stone. I get this like lesson to kind of maybe fall back on, right? To make sure that there's enough content there for me to feel like I have, I'm going to meet the goals for that lesson. But then it's like, now I just have to focus on like, what is the thing, the prompt? Here in Math Moments land, we like to call it like the spark of the lesson. In Singapore math, they might call it the anchor task, right? Now, of course, maybe there isn't a great first initial problem, but even if I have this lesson and I look to the lesson, I go, okay, it's helping me meet all these expectations or standards, or the specific standard I'm after really focusing on today. And I go, what is the one question I can ask students at the front? And it might simply be a Googled image. It might simply be a verbal statement or a story or a context. I'm wondering, do you feel like that would be more manageable than, let's say, starting from scratch and coming up with the entire idea all on your own? Do you feel like, does that reduce anxiety? Is it increasing anxiety? Or are you sort of going, nah, it's not really helping me out here?
Well, no, that, yeah. So if I know on a given day, this is what I want to be teaching, these are my learning goals for the day. And, oh, here's a really cool question that I haven't had to think of on my own, to launch the activity, that would be pretty cool. And I think that might be what I'm looking to you guys to maybe supply. I don't know. Kind of figured that's what you were all about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we when we craft lessons, that's, going through that activity, that kind of thought exercise that Kyle just kind of outlined is exactly how we've crafted all the lessons on our website, when we create them. And I think there's always power in kind of knowing that process, so that we can, repeat that over and over and over again, and not say fall back on, always going to that exact lesson every single time, because it might not fit, for this group of students. It might not fit for the next year. And maybe I'm teaching a different course and they're, I can't find those lessons that are out there. It's always, in our opinion, kind of a stronger skill to kind of think about the elements that are easily implementable, so that, like what he's saying, you can take any resource and quickly add or change some elements to create that thinking type task. Another way that we usually think about, starting those tasks is, that's a little different than trying to go the curiosity route is could I put my students in a situation that creates a productive struggle that leads to the thing that we need to teach that day? Like sometimes this usually is a way, when we're working with high school students in a situation that might help, build their understanding of where this math needs to come from, and why this strategy works, or why, that strategy is better than this strategy, is to kind of put them in these struggling situations that at the end, either this new strategy comes out on top, or it puts you as the teacher in a position to say, like, we've all struggled on this joint venture for the last little bit, but there is a strategy here that maybe I haven't seen yet, but maybe last year's student tried this strategy and it looked like this. And all of a sudden that's the new teaching element for the day. So it's like you interject after everyone's had a shared experience with a strategy that was on your learning goal list the whole time. And now it's a way for them to kind of like, oh, it's like I see that connects with what I was doing, making those connections very clear. We call that kind of tying the bow, that this is a great strategy to help in this situation. And hey, why don't you try my strategy, or hey, that last year's student strategy next on this next problem, and kind of increment the work after that. Like, that's another way to think about taking any lesson, any resource, and kind of thinking about it slightly different, so it transforms into more thinking than, say, let's just do the I do, we do, you do model.
You're right. Well, and that is one thing that I'm really trying to grow with them. I have signs up in my room that we are thinkers, we are leaders, we're not followers, and, curiosity, creativity, perseverance. And I think, as I reflect over my past 11 years there, there is a much greater willingness on the part of the students to think and engage in a little bit of struggle. When I first started teaching there, if they didn't get something instantly, they would actually like throw their papers off their desk. It was really interesting. Or if there was a little mistake made, they would wad the paper up and throw it away, or, erase absolutely everything. And so, some of the things that you're you're saying or speaking to me and reminding me of where I've come from and their willingness to struggle with a problem. And when you talk about, you know, the strategy that a student used on a previous year and trying to wrap that in with what I'm doing with a student on a given year, the beautiful thing about the size of my school is that the student from last year is my student this year, and will be my student next year. So I can remind them of their own strategy that they employed to solve a particular problem maybe last year or 2 years ago, and say, hey, look, you know, how about when you did this?
I love it.
Let's build on that.
Or you know, when I say last year's student, a lot of times it's not last year's student. It just makes them look like somebody else did it this way, but it's like the strategy that no one else has yet come up with. So I usually say last year's student, but not necessarily. It is a strategy that last year's student, I kind of pull the wool over their eyes there a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It sounds like you've had some like little takeaways here. I want to offer 2 thoughts or 2 suggestions maybe as for some next steps that you might consider. One is we actually have a open training on what we call transforming your textbook into a curiosity machine. So it really highlights some of what we described here. We call it the curiosity path of really trying to take any old problem and trying to essentially draw out the 4 key components that are really important. You mentioned it, the withholding of information piece. We want to actually like create some anticipation, which causes some noticing and wondering. And then we always try our best to incorporate some sort of, you know, estimate or prediction of some type, right? And there's nothing better than getting people when they don't have enough information to get their gut opinion on something, right? Like how many of that, like why do we always have these like guess how many gumballs are in the jar, you know, as a prize at an event, right? It's because everybody wants to get, you know, their thought in there, right? Everybody wants to guess, everybody wants to win the prize. And if we can do more of that in our math class, which again, doesn't have to mean like staying up late every night and making it the perfect problem or the perfect start to your lesson. It's just about considering those 4 things. And what you'll get in that training is you'll get this opportunity to kind of check out a couple problems and examples of what they look like prior, and then what we did to sort of shift them. And there's no perfect way to do it. The way you're going to do it might look different than the way I would do it. The way I would do it might look different than John, and so on and so forth. So that's a great start. And the other thing you might want to consider doing is checking out on our website. We have over 60 problem-based units, and day 1 of every single lesson or every single unit is open for you to explore. Now, they range in grade from K all the way through high school. We really have honed in on some of those like upper elementary through middle grades. Like that's sort of like the wheelhouse of where most units are. But I'm not saying to go there to necessarily grab tasks and use them. You could use them as exemplars, like to go through and sort of like analyze how we use the curiosity path as a means to try to get students to kind of engage in the problem and help us get towards what we call the sense-making portion of the lesson, which is going to be where students are actually doing the thinking, where they're actually, you know, trying to understand what's happening. They're going to pull out those strategies that maybe they've used in the past or that they have available to them. And it's going to give you information as the educator to go, oh, this student is here in the developmental trajectory, and I want to help nudge them along to get them further along that path. Those are the things that we're trying to do through our units. So you've got kind of like 2 thoughts or 2 next steps that you can dig into. And we'd encourage you to, you know, let us know how things are going, like what your big takeaway is after you complete them. But before we let you go and kind of dig into those, I'm wondering, are there any sort of key takeaways from today, like a big takeaway that has maybe resonated with you to help you feel like that pebble in your shoe is either getting smaller, or maybe, heck, maybe we even knocked that entire pebble out for you?
Well, I think, you know, just some of the things that you said, I guess, reinforce what I am doing in my own classroom. And I think I might have misled you. We do have a curriculum. It's just, and I think it's pretty decent. In fact, I picked it 10 years ago, but it's 10 years old, and it is kind of overwhelming for our students. But anyway, I guess, yeah, I just feel validated in the things that I am doing. But
Good.
I'm also encouraged that, there's, some stuff that you guys have out there that's published, that might give me some support, and then things that I can share with the rest of our math teachers, which would go all the way down to kindergarten, because I would like to grow these kinds of notions about that productive struggle, starting at an earlier age. I
love
think
it.
they do a lot of rote mathematics in the elementary grades, and I that builds confidence, I mean, knowing your multiplication facts gives you confidence.
Totally.
Because I do have high school students that pick up a calculator, they reach for the calculator when they're doing 0 times 3.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course I have a big fit, and
Yeah.
I snatch it out of their hands and throw it across.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, no, use your brain, you can do this. But there needs to be a blend.
Sure.
And so I would like to be able to share with some of the other teachers at the lower grades the kind of work that you guys do.
That sounds like a great plan. And, the younger, the younger you can engage students in, that productive struggle and changing the mindset of what mathematics is and what mathematics should be at school, will eventually pay off. And eventually, by the time those students get to you in high school, maybe they're not whipping out that calculator. Maybe they are, using the strategies, the models that they've, built up over time. So I'm excited for the work that you're going to engage in this next little bit and share with your, fellow educators. So Cara, I want to thank you for joining us here today.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah.
John and I learn a ton from these conversations, and it's clear that Cara has a lot of awesome things going on. However, time is always a factor. And, something I sensed here, John, was that, Cara knows much of the pieces to put in place, but that time piece seems to be getting in the way. And I think sometimes we feel like it's an either or, right? Like we can only have this like really effective, really rich, really exciting lesson, or we have sort of like something we may have pulled out of the textbook, or maybe something that we pulled off, a website, or teachers pay teachers, as we heard here today, when in reality, starting with what you have and making some adjustments might be just what you need. So for me, I guess the part of the tree that I'm thinking about right now are the leaves, right? And we're looking at these leaves as, hey, you may have a curriculum that's been selected by your school, your district, or maybe you're left to fend for yourself. In either case, whatever you're finding as sort of the start, the backbone of your math program, there are things that we can do to adjust and ensure that the branches of the tree are being leveraged, which are the pedagogical practices that we're putting into place. So as we mentioned here, there's some great resources that you can leverage. The one that came to mind for Cara today was our Transforming Your Textbook into a Curiosity Machine. We've got an awesome self-paced and freely accessible mini course that you can go check out over at makemathmoments.com/transform. Once again, that's at makemathmoments.com/transform. So you can strengthen those branches and ensure that those leaves are green and flourishing.
Awesome stuff there, Kyle. So, hey, is this the first time you listened to a podcast episode? If so, hit the subscribe button right now so that you don't miss out on new episodes. And if you are returning and you've listened to a few, you've listened to some, you've listened to many, then we want to welcome you back and encourage you to share the podcast with a friend, a neighbor, a person of interest, a person that you know is going to get a lot of value out of the particular episode you're thinking of right now. Please share that podcast with that person so that we can reach as many educators as we can, where our goal is to help 1 million students with the work that we do. And we can only do that through folks like you by taking action on what you've heard here today. So make sure that you share. You can also engage with us over on any of our social media accounts at Make Math Moments. And hopefully we'll see you over there and keep the conversation going.
Friends, show notes, links to resources, and complete transcripts, including the link to that Transform Your Textbook into a Curiosity Machine mini course that you can dig into right now, are available over on makemathmoments.com/episode 240. That's right. We are at episode 240. makemathmoments.com/episode 240. Well, Math Moment Makers, until next time, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you.